here. All right. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Winkler. I am the founder of True Agile, Disrupting the Status Quo. Today with us, we have Mitch Goldstein. Just a brief background here. We are trying this out as a new approach to a learning environment, just having an Agile chat. And with those that have had experience in Agile, some of the newer folks starting don't know about certain things. So we want to look to the folks that have been in the industry for some time to learn from them. So I hope that we can use this as a very much a learning experience. So let me go ahead and start with our guest, Mitch Goldstein. Absolute Agile legend and pioneering in Agile, have been around since I think the 80s, you had stated. But enough of me kind of chatting. Go ahead and introduce yourself and who you are and how you have navigated and worked in the Agile environment.
First off, Jonathan, I really do sincerely thank you so much for an opportunity to talk to both you and also anyone in the Agile community. We have to talk about what we're doing to understand it and to move forward as a community. So
Correct.
my roots go back to the 80s, like you said. I started off in the software business in 1985. I got my first job as a junior programmer, worked from working on mainframes and IBM machines to working on local area networks. From there, I worked on the VAX for quite some time. I was a VAX internals guy for a brief shining moment in time. That was with Chemical Bank in the 90s. I moved from there, discovering Java early as an early adopter with one of the baby bells in Chicago. I worked on Java 0.9 and got an opportunity to get an early taste of that. Java became my life at that point in time. I learned about writing UIs in Java. That was a real passion. And I ended up writing a book called Hardcore JFC, Conquering the Swing Architecture, which is a deep dive into what at what time was a pretty complicated and interesting architecture. In kind of my travels around speaking about those topics and publishing the book, I got to meet other people who published books at around the same time, 1998, 99, 2000. Scott Ambler was a very early influencer. He was already deeply into the Agile mindset when I first encountered him, and he talked about his book on agility. Certainly, Martin Fowler also had his book on refactoring, came out around that time. It was the buzzword still being used. I think he'd be very proud to hear that word. And so that's where I got my first start. But the world wasn't really ready for Agile. And it took another few years for, I think, Jeff Sutherland and Scrum to really kind of start to get teams to think about new ways of working. And in the early 2000s, I joined a company and we aggressively adopted Agile and Scrum, coterminously or whatever it was. I got my first taste of being a Scrum developer, my first taste of being a Scrum master, my first taste of being a product owner. Back in those days, we rotated those roles in the team.
Interesting.
So that was a pretty common practice. From there, I actually continued to write code for quite some time, mostly Java. I branched out into C# for a while there. Eventually, I got to the point where I was like, okay, that's enough. I went into management as a consulting manager. And during that time, when my company was acquired, there was some other changes happening. I moved over into Agile coaching, having had the real experience of the early, what I like to kind of call like the golden age of Agile, which is right after the manifesto came out, between that time and when the Scrum Guide was published. That's kind of like, I nominate that as the golden age. You might argue maybe the 90s was the golden age and that was the silver age, but that's okay. That's a pretty fine point. So I've been doing coaching for a while. For a long time, I was focused on delivering safe transformations with Accenture Solutions IQ. Prior to that, I was with Suma and CGI. I was on a pretty a great program where if you wanted to be a coach, you had to get certification and
Sure.
be mentored for a year. So
Oh,
I did
wow.
a year mentorship from one of my heroes, Phil Van Sickle. If you're out there, I still use things that I learned from him every day. So now I'm with HMH, which is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Publishing and Educational Company. My company prior to that was acquired, was NWEA. And here we are. Now we're facing a situation where, one of the things I'm going to have to talk and think about is how to take two organizations that are different culture, different composition, and glue them together in a way where
Sure.
we maximize our value to the
Very good.
kids and enable them.
Very good. And is that a nonprofit or for profit?
NWEA was a nonprofit. HMH I believe it's privately held by a venture capitalist now, but
Interesting.
the mission remains the same: to
Absolutely.
proliferate, use technology, use whatever we can to help kids learn. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Very good. Yeah, thank you very much for that intro there and kind of your journey, your agile journey, dating back years ago, and just very fascinating to hear how you've evolved in your agile journey and how you continue to evolve. I'd like to just get to my next question about being an expert and having all this great experience throughout agile, and seeing the different changes and the rise and fall of certain frameworks, tools. I'm just curious your current the current state of agile as of today. What are your thoughts on that? Bringing in all that experience you've had as well.
Well, yeah, yeah, I think this is a great topic. I think this should be a topic of open discussion because I think it benefits the work community to talk these things out and not to have the kind of anxiety that we dread of not being able to trust each other in our community. So
Absolutely.
with that already having prepared the excuse for my response, I say this: I really don't know, and I hate to be the giver of ambivalent and ambiguous answers, but hear me out.
Sure.
I think that there's some great stuff going on, and I think there's some terrible stuff going on. But that's true about everything. That's not just true about Agile. Agile's different because it has this, it's, there's, culture. It's an interesting word, right? One of the interpretations of culture is that which surrounds a cult, right? It
Sure.
actually comes from the same word,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you want to play this kind of word, because you can say culture, it's about a cult. It's about worshiping an idea and elevating ideas above other ideas. So in that sense, it's no different than anything else. The difference is it's so high profile because it
Sure.
promised so many things.
Sure.
So if your question is more like, where is Agile today given the promises that have been made in the
Yeah.
name of Agile, I would say D plus. If you were to say, where is Agile in the development of those ideas which intend to liberate us from bad ways of working and toxic ways of working and focus on delivering maximal value to customers as quickly as possible, Agile's doing splendid.
Yeah.
And it's up to each individual person to decide for themselves where do they kind of exist on that spectrum.
Sure.
It's not my job to say.
Sure, absolutely. What just to kind of dive a little deeper into that, what are some things currently you're seeing, just examples of things that are good or great that's in the agile community, and those that are not so great or good, or you're seeing deviate from, maybe bad agile, I would say.
I think what we're seeing in the industry, and I'll recast that in light of the first question. I think what we're seeing in many respects is a very healthy questioning
Good.
of what
Mhm.
was considered to be axiomatic
Sure.
about agile. And if we be wrong, then we accept that and we say, okay, when and I think the classic example, which I would bring, is this one axiom, right, that we keep hearing repeated. The axiom is something like this: the good things about Agile can be replicated at scale with, I'll even go as broad as possible, similar effects. Okay.
Sure.
And I think what I'm really seeing is people are indeed starting to question that premise.
Interesting.
And I think, if we were to say this, to me, it's the joke about, 9 women being pregnant for a month as a kind of a metaphor for that kind of efficiency.
Sure.
So, we'll see where it goes. I really don't know. Honestly, I think we are going to have to take a long, hard look at the axioms
Hmm.
behind the things that we're doing. I think the axioms of Agile are baked into the manifesto. The axioms of Scrum are baked into that. The axioms of SAFe are baked into that. They're all available for
Yep.
questioning
Interesting.
by a healthy community of practitioners. Okay, so none of this is unhealthy. Uh, where is it going? Uh, you can see SAFe has just come out with 6.0. I got my first one was 4.0, so I have pretty good familiarity with SAFe. And I haven't been doing SAFe because the companies that I've been working with, they don't like it. They've adopted it. They're in the very,
Mhm.
very late sort of phases of adoption. And I think that one axiom, that one linchpin, might be where things are not exactly lining up. And if we erase that premise that we can treat teams of teams the same way we treat teams, what's that do to the methodology? It basically crumbles. It just comes to
Sure.
pieces.
Sure.
Uh, so I think what we're going to start seeing is a very healthy examination of alternatives.
Interesting.
Some alternatives, and I give these without endorsement, just a list: tame flow, alternative, different way of looking at things.
Hmm.
Shape up from base camp, very excited. And it's almost an anti agile metaphor,
Yeah.
purpose to counterbalance the over enthusiasm, overselling, overzealousness, uh, profiteering, naked profiteering that's going on. This is intended to counterbalance, and I'm all for that. I think that's what keeps us honest,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
We examine those premises and discard the ones that turn out to be faulty.
Absolutely. So you're seeing a lot more than in the past, this questioning of what agile is, and then having some examples of these organizations that are going, we're not even going to use the word agile, but we're going to try and create something new in that. So we're going through this kind of m- metamorphosis of agile, or change of agile a bit, because it's been so exploited.
Right, and I think that's also healthy. I mean, I remember this happens in fashion, it happens in music, it happens in literature.
Yeah.
It's a cultural pattern that we see over and over again. I say it's just the ebb and flow of civilization. It's just the
Yep.
way things are. I remember for a while there, everybody kind of poo-pooed this idea of having like high level languages run things. Well, because we didn't have the processing power for them, right? Now
Sure.
you don't even think like I talk to my kids and I'm like, wow, don't you think that'll take up a lot of space? And they look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you
Totally.
talking about space? I'm like, dude, that's like 2 gigabytes. It's like, Dad, I have 4 terabytes. I'm not even worried about them. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man.
Yeah. The evolution of it. That that brings up a really good point. This kind of like cyclical, we are in technology, things have to constantly be changing.
Yeah.
And what is that? Creative destruction, where some things just have to come to an end and something new has to replace it, over time. And maybe we're at that crux, as you're stating, with some of these organizations exploring it. Do you see that some of corporations have to take it, right, and they have to want it? Do you see that becoming something like, um, they slowly adapt, or is very quick, or do you see that, from the corporation standpoint in adoption, or does it happen where something like where they did agile and they kind of totally missed the point and took all these things and made it a very corporate, less
Well,
human thing?
I'm going to have to give you a cryptic answer because I honestly I think all of these efforts start out with good intentions. We
Sure,
all
sure,
want things to be better. We all want things to be faster. We all want things to be cheaper. And I got to be honest with you, I'm on Eliyahu Goldratt, the theorist of the theory of constraints, basically said the goal is to make money. I don't care what you're making money for. The
sure,
goal is to make money. And if as long as we look at that, we're in a safe zone. So if the goal is to make money, eventually we will, we'll figure out how to do that. The issue is what's the best way to make money? What's the most
sure,
efficient? What's the most logical? What's the most repeatable way to make money? This is what everybody wants. Agile was promised as delivering the goods on throughput, on quality, on name your attribute. And I think we're going to have to look very, very seriously at the question of, is that the best way? I see
sure,
the latest sort of craze, and please forgive me for saying this, but I'm a disruptor. OKRs. I mean,
sure.
I've heard
Oh my gosh.
absolutely enough about OKRs. And I'm paralyzed because I just say, that's another one of those cyclical things. It comes into prominence. Somebody does a podcast, and somebody else does a podcast, somebody else does it, and then all of a sudden, everybody's talking about OKRs are the answer to everything.
Sure,
How many times are we going to go through this before we learn that that's not the case? That the way to improve things is by using the theory of constraints, for example, to look at a holistic situation and drill down to the problems and fix them.
sure.
Have agile transformations done that? Is that what they're in the business of doing? And I would say, as they have been sold and executed, no, they have
Yeah,
not.
yep,
Okay. And that's where I think where the rubber hits the road is eventually it might happen in 5 years. Someone's going to say, we spent $250 million on Agile. And
yep.
what do we have to show for it?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And I don't know why those conversations aren't happening, but I think eventually they're going to happen. And I don't think they can happen too broadly because you can't generalize what's been done, for any particular agile transformation, right?
sure.
So
Do
we'll
you
see.
do you think there's some sort of catalyst or something that would force an organization to really question that? I
Oh
think
yeah.
of these agile transformations. They think of agile as very much a luxury item, and they're profitable, and they're always, why would they change? Why would they change anything when I'm having record revenue and profit month over month? Do you think there'll be something that comes along that goes, okay, now you really have to kind of change, and address this? And what is that catalyst, in your opinion, if it does exist, or your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess too. I think the catalyst will be economic downturn.
Okay.
That will be the ultimate catalyst. Will be
Sure.
economic
Sure.
downturn. Which, I mean, I'm no oracle, but I don't foresee anything major. Doesn't mean it won't happen. No one can predict what's going to happen. I just don't. Looking at things like hiring and spending and all
Sure.
these things seem to be plugging along. So it's going to have to be something pretty disruptive that people are going to have to look and say, okay, in order for us to make it, we're going to have to figure out how to cut 40%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once you start talking in those numbers, it's going to be a ruthless cut. You're going to
Sure.
start seeing the consultants go. You're going to start seeing all the kind of ancillary non value stream roles are going to start to go. I'm not predicting, I'm just saying
Yeah.
anything can happen that'll put us in that situation, and then you're going to start to see uh, And yeah, it's very worrisome, I think, for everybody in the industry. Is we're not talking about it too much, but I think it's the unspoken challenge is that most of us are either consultants or not, shall we say, profit makers.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
How's that for a euphemism?
Yeah.
You know, we're not a profit unless we're selling agile as a commodity, or selling training, or selling coaching as a commodity, or
Sure.
whatever, trusted advice as a commodity. All these things are legitimate, but they're also not necessary,
Yeah.
strictly
Yeah.
necessary to the conduct of commerce. Face it.
Yeah. True. Well, and it's interesting to see, the Agile Manifesto is free. The Scrum Guide is free. All these
Mhm.
things are free to read through, and you might need some consulting to understand it or interpret it a bit, but they're free. I mean, the information is there in a
Yeah.
lot of cases as well.
I think I can't imagine anything in like organizational science that's been so widely discussed and propagated. So I mean, it has a significant body of expertise and theory behind it. It's got literally millions of practitioners. Uh, Maybe that will protect us. People will say, we're going on hard times. Maybe it'd be good to have someone who knows how to talk to people.
Sure. Yeah.
Or, we're falling on hard times. Maybe we need someone to help us figure out how to get people to really have good throughput and really like their job and stuff like that, which is really what I think agile coaching is mostly about. It's not about it's about change. It's about everything's about change. It's about how do you deal with change? How do you maintain continuity? How do you
Sure.
keep people? I think we have a long way to go in kind of the interpretation of what agile means. Hopefully, if we don't learn the easy way, we learn the hard way. And that when we go into the hard times, people say, maybe not having, a manager for every 4 developers is not such a great idea, but mobbing is a fabulous idea.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
imagine how much money we save by mobbing instead of, doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it is
Totally.
that we do. Maybe it'll come to that. I'm hopeful. If we
Yeah.
make the case, it may happen.
Very interesting. Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of this change occurring, but there's also a lot of reactive versus proactive. I just had spoken briefly in a chat with Jeff Sutherland about Deutsche Bank, that were consumer loans, business loans, uh, would take 3 weeks to get done. Amazon entered into that realm. You can get a business loan approved in 3 hours, and I mean
Yeah.
now there's a fire under Deutsche. They have there might have been some opportunity to change, but now it's reactive. It's not proactive, and now it's kind of like what do you do
Well,
then? Do we go ahead? Sorry.
yeah, I mean, you're right, but that is kind of a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking. Everything, you always, for every success, there's always at least one entity that's going to say, wow, I'm really kicking myself because we could have written the first operating system for the PC, but,
Yeah,
Bill Gates sandbagged us. And there's,
sure.
there's stories like that. It's just absolutely true. I think it's really the primary story of IT, if you think about it, that
Yeah.
some of the early advances were made by people outside of the system, but by all means, so many advances were made deep inside the system, like at DARPA. We have so
Okay.
much to thank for that, secretive, monolithic, organization that, unaccountable organization that
Sure.
controls IT.
Yeah. Interesting.
Years. We wouldn't
So,
be talking right now if not for
yeah.
DARPA. That's for sure.
Well, we've talked a lot about the current state. I just want to give you another opportunity. We've talked a bit about what we'd like to see going forward. What would you personally like to see going forward, more explicitly in, maybe not agile in just saying agile, but the idea going forward in the industry? What are
Great
some of your
question,
intentions?
Jonathan. I think, uh, once again, I'll take leave for a vague answer. I think what we're going to see is a discarding of this idea that agile means fabricating a an organizational structure and a process by which that kind of like building the hardware, building the software, flipping the switch.
Sure.
And I would like to just erase that premise. And the premise I'd like to bake in is that agile now means fluidity,
Mhm.
that it means not having a team prime or having an HR oriented team prime, but that the work that you do doesn't occur in the context of your HR team, your career team. There's
Sure.
a that you're on a career team. You have a manager who's responsible for what you do to help you, blah blah blah, whatever managers do. I know I'm a manager, um, but your actual work that you engage in to build stuff is not done in that team auspice, but that there's another team auspice that is an agile team that you work on that does agile things.
Interesting.
And I think that that type of fluidity is going to save us,
Yeah.
because I think what we're going to do is we're going to say, what the easiest thing for us to do would be to break the rigidity of the hierarchy and kind of bring in maybe a little bit of Stafford beer. And Stafford Beer was a sociologist, I guess, primarily, and came up with very interesting and very nuanced organizational structures that are based not on a hierarchy but on recursion.
Hmm.
Absolutely fascinating, very heady stuff. But he was a daring thinker, and he said, okay, maybe organizations shouldn't be, you work for X, therefore you're accountable to this one person, and blah, 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 and to spread things out and have a real team accountability
Yeah.
requires fluidity. Here's my argument. I have these teams and I have a problem that needs to be solved. And that problem can't be solved by any of the three teams individually. What's my next move? To break the problem up so that each team can digest it and communicate about the problem? Or is my best bet to say, okay, you guys are now one team.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Call me when it's solved.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's the change I want to see. I haven't figured out how to articulate it exactly such that it's easily understandable. But I think you get where I'm coming from. That the rigidity, there needs to be some rigidity for legal reasons, for
Sure.
professional or
Sure.
cultural, whatever reasons. Agree that scaffolding can be there, but the work that you do should be fluid. Wherever you're needed, you
Absolutely.
go. Whatever needs to be done. Oh, geez. Well, this is look. It's not the thing that I'm best at, but I'll do it because I know that it needs to be done. And in order for everybody to succeed, it
Yeah.
needs to be done.
Absolutely. And if I'm understanding correctly, is that kind of, this one team contributing? I'm using the example in waterfall, we have silos, BA hands to the developer, hands to the
Mm,
tester, and they're not on the same team. They're siloed into each team.
right.
Is
The
that kind of
worst
where?
worst case scenario is what I call that. But yes.
Yeah, and so I've seen this happen where you suggest to these organizations, hey, maybe move those all to one team. And it's like, no, we're not doing that at all. This is a set structure and we're not doing any sort of restructuring. We think that, we have the BA, we have the tester, we have the developer, we have all these, and they have their own management structure, their own
Yeah.
hierarchy. And you kind of bring it up and they go, not at this organization. We don't do that here. And then you go, well, are you really thinking about this agile thing? I don't know. Any thoughts on that? I'm just thinking out
Well,
loud here with that.
yeah, I get it, and I'll fall back on one of my old gags is that you're either doing agile or you're doing squat, and I say that squat stands for status quo with agile terminology.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you can't just take like your hierarchical structure, add the word agile in front of any sprinkling of roles and expect
Absolutely.
that to be that's not it's not embracing the intended spirit of agile, as at least as far as I can see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a shame because people who are against hierarchy would say, hierarchy, there's some intrinsic toxicity to hierarchy.
Sure.
And without going, I'm not here to talk about that, but you can just imagine for yourself. There's this notion of like importance and hierarchy seem to be inextricably linked. That if you're at the very, very lowest level, so to speak, of an organization, that you somehow aren't special enough to talk to
Yeah.
certain people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see,
Absolutely.
and it's not advertent, right? It's just that in big organizations that people don't have, you don't have time to do that. In your small company, you can talk to your CTO 11 times a week. In a bigger company,
Sure.
that CTO's got a lot more to do. So that type of hierarchy really hampers it. I'm not saying dispose of it. I'm saying keep it for what it's good at. What it's not good at is producing high quality software.
Totally.
That's what it's not good at. So what's good at that? Loosely, teams with natural leaders. That okay, what does that mean? It means that people know who the leader is. You don't have to promote somebody or title someone. That doesn't change. Leadership is something that's kind of like a silent ascent in a team. So why would you not let the teams form
Yeah.
themselves?
What do you
Right?
think? What?
This doesn't
Oh, go
seem
ahead.
like it's. Yeah, I'm sorry, John. It just
No, go
doesn't
ahead.
seem like this should be a controversy. Yet,
Yeah.
I
No.
think
It totally.
I'd be laughed at if I said this. But to
Absolutely.
me, this is the essence of what we're asking.
Absolutely.
Focus. Your focus isn't on how am I going to get this chunky bonus? Your focus is on your customer. Well, if you focus on your customer, you don't care about your bonus. You
Yeah.
care about getting the work done so that your
Absolutely.
customer gets your best stuff. That's agile. That's to me,
Yeah.
that's the essence of it.
Do you see any of these companies waking up to that, or do you think they'll just go down? If another agile company that does embrace those values and principles comes along, they'll
Well,
just go down.
I it's I see why you're asking the question, and I wish I had an easy answer. And I think that's why I'm so easy. And I don't really think so. I just don't think when the authors of this manifesto sat down and came up with these ideas and attempted to crystallize them
Hmm.
in an effort to not to create structure but to destroy structure.
Sure.
That's just
Yeah.
how I see it.
Absolutely.
It's a it's
Absolutely.
a it's a positive destructive force. That's what agile should be. It should be destroying silos. It should be destroying hierarchy
Yeah.
where it's not needed.
Absolutely.
In the
Absolutely.
delivery of value, what the hell does hierarchy do for you? It doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah.
You got to do it. You got to get it done, solve the problem.
Yeah.
So that's the stance I take. I mean, I think companies are trying. I'll definitely hand it. They are
Sure.
trying. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it if they weren't trying. Are they succeeding? I think in some ways they're succeeding. And the reasons why they're not succeeding aren't the reasons that they think they're not succeeding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a touchy subject, but I think it's also absolutely true.
Yeah. Interesting. Very good. I know we're coming up on we went a little over 30 minutes here. Any final thoughts around, for people just getting into agile or learning about Scrum or whatever, any final thoughts or advice you would give to those folks or going forward,
Yeah,
especially with it evolving?
definitely. Get hooked up with a community of people who are doing what you like to do
Very good.
and do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's not happening where you are, try to make it happen. I don't believe that the ideas behind the Agile Manifesto or the Scrum Guide or even the safe principles and values, none of those things are irresponsible. The
Sure.
question is, how bad do you really want to reap the benefits?
Mhm.
And I say, focus on this, that if you're being asked to do a thing and it doesn't align with your understanding of the principles and values, speak up. Don't
Yeah.
be shy.
Yep.
Okay. If it turns to be a bad thing, then your ideas about what you're doing have to be recalculated. You're not in the
Sure.
right place.
Sure. Absolutely.
So don't let the agile cliches distort what we know, the manifesto and the scrum. All these good positive values, transparency, focus, all these things, they're absolutely irreplaceable. There's no not having that and succeeding. So let's
Totally.
try to remember that as
Yeah.
a community of communities moving forward and get, I hate to say it, let's, oh man, I can't believe I'm saying it. Let's get back to the roots. Let's get
Sure.
back to the
Renaissance.
principles and values. Let's read them. Let's understand them. Let's talk
Absolutely.
about them. Let's modernize them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting. And just to echo that real quick, that happened to me early on in my career. You start to question yourself.
Mm,
You've read the Agile Manifesto and you go to this organization, you go, do I not understand it? But then it's kind of like, maybe it's not me, maybe it's the organization. And I think you're absolutely right in being fearless and questioning that status quo or disrupting it. Um, Awesome advice. And I think we're coming up on time, but thank you very much for joining, Mitch. It's great to speak with someone with so much knowledge and background. And for me, it's a learning experience. I'm always learning. I'm always learning for those that have been in it much longer than I have, and I'm hoping the people that have tuned in can learn some things from you as well going forward. So thank you again, Mitch, and we
thank you,
look forward to
Jonathan.
maybe talking to you again in the future. Thank you very
Right on.
much. Have
Thanks,
a good
everybody.
day. Yep.
Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.